If you're somebody who's made a business out of taking old rundown houses that nobody else wants, fixing them up and putting them back in the market so a family can move into them, well, the BC government decided you don't need to have that business anymore. If you're somebody who wants to buy a house in a more established neighborhood, but you don't have the time, the money, or the skills to fix up that house yourself, well, the BC government says you don't really need to have that house as an option to buy, because the BC government has decided they're going to tax flippers to prevent them from operating. And why would they do that? Because we've seen a lot of people saying online, especially it seems, we need to ban these flippers. That is one of the biggest problems in the Canadian housing market right now. But has anybody stopped to ask, is it actually flippers that are the true problem in the Canadian housing market? More specifically, maybe in BC? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do today. Hey there, and welcome back to Bald Prairie Real Estate. My name is Matthew Pfeifer, real estate agent in Regina. That's my trusted assistant, 𝗵𝗫𝗲𝗏. This is the weekly news recap where I go through the most interesting Canadian real estate related news topics, give you my thoughts and opinions on them. We're going to be talking this week about what's going on with Canada's inflation numbers, because that data just came out from Stats Canada. A report out from Royal LePage showing what you get if you spent $1 million in different markets in Canada, and the differences are absolutely staggering. And the BC budget just came out, and there's some massive changes for their housing market, specifically property transfer tax changes and their new tax on flippers. We're gonna be doing a deep dive on that. But before we get into it, let's start off with another one of my terrible bad dad jokes. What are a ninja's favorite type of shoes? Sneakers. Favorite terrible joke that I can use in a future episode? Put in the comments below. Let's get into it. Let's start off by talking about the inflation rate in Canada, which came in lower than expected. The market was kind of expecting inflation to come in somewhere around 3.1 to 3.3%, and it came in at 2.9%. So not only was it lower than market expectations, it was also lower than the Bank of Canada's target rate of 1 to 3%. And it was driven primarily by drops pretty much across the board, except for shelter. That was up 6.2%, so basically double what the headline inflation was, and it counts right now for half of the total inflation in Canada. Yet the weighted basket that shelter is, or weight in the basket that shelter has, is only 28%, so it's very disproportionately impacting the overall inflation numbers, and I beat it to death. Inflation has gone up, predominantly driven, or the shelter part of it has been driven by the increase in rent and the increase in mortgage costs. Both of those are really pushing up shelter costs. Everybody knows that. The interesting thing is how the tone of the conversation has changed in just a week. Last week, the jobs numbers came in a little bit better than expected, and everybody was already talking about, well, the Bank of Canada is for sure not going to cut interest rates now anytime soon. In fact, they might even raise them potentially. And a week later, now all the talk is about not only is for sure the Bank of Canada going to cut rates, it's when, how soon. Everybody is guessing. Nobody has the exact date. You know, it's not like we're waiting on this, but I still hold to my prediction. I don't think we're going to see rate cuts before June this year. Now, if you are thinking about buying or selling a house, if you're in Regina, of course, I'd love to help you out. 𝗵𝗫𝗏𝗏 will come along. She left. She didn't like the terrible joke. But if you're somewhere else in Canada, you don't already have a great real estate agent, I have a network of great real estate agents across the country. If you look in the description of this video, there's gonna be a link into my calendar where I'm gonna book you in for a call. I'm gonna learn what's important to you in a house and also what's important to you in a real estate agent. I'm gonna get you paired up with that perfect agent for you in your market. Now we have a report from Royal LePage, and it's showing what you get if you have a budget of $1 million in different cities across Canada. Nationally, a $1 million house has 3.2 bedrooms and 2.1 bathrooms, about 1,700 square feet. Now, I know people from Toronto and Vancouver are groaning, saying if you spent $1 million, you're getting a starter house, and people in the prairies or on the East Coast are saying that's a McMansion if you spend $1 million. And that is the stark differences of what $1 million buys you if we go across Canada. And it's why I continue to say we don't have a Canadian real estate market. We have a bunch of regional markets, and the differences are quite distinct as you go across them. Let's dive deep in this because there's some interesting differences here. And here is what $1 million buys you, and this is in the city of Toronto itself, so not the surrounding area. You're looking at a townhouse, not even a single family home. You're gonna be a couple of bedrooms, you're on a busy street, you got one bathroom, no yard, and absolutely no garage. And then in contrast, if you spend $1 million in Regina, you get a house that's 3,200 square feet, has 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and it's on a quiet little cul-de-sac with a fantastic yard. It was actually Edmonton, where you see the largest square footage on average if you're spending $1 million at 2,700 square feet. and Vancouver the least, where you can expect to get 900 square feet. What really blew my mind here, and it shows the bias that I have coming from Regina, obviously a much more affordable market, was that 64% of the survey respondents said that $1 million was a reasonable budget to buy a house that suited their needs. So that means you're going to need a $200,000 down payment to buy $1 million house. Your mortgage payment is going to be $4,500 a month alone. $1 million budget is 3.5 times the average price in Regina and more than twice the price of my own house. It was absolutely astounding that people thought $1 million was a reasonable budget. It's crazy. By the way, if you are curious what the different costs are across Canada, I've started a series of videos comparing the purchase prices, what you need for down payments, legal fees, all that stuff, and what your monthly mortgage payment's gonna be. I've got a series of videos I've started putting out on that. I'll put a link in the description below, and I'll have one of those pop-up cards to take you directly to the playlist. The next two articles here, we're gonna be looking at the BC budget and starting off with the changes to their property transfer tax exemptions. BC has had its property transfer tax system, land transfer taxes, for a number of years now, and they've had exemptions for first-time homebuyers. They're now extending the maximum purchase price that first-time homebuyer can make before they have to pay those transfer taxes up to $835,000. And I believe the way that this is worded, it's kind of a little bit ambiguous, but all properties now under $500,000, regardless of who the purchaser is, I believe are going to be exempt from these transfer taxes. For new builds, that has been increased from $750,000 to $1.1 million, where there's going to be no property transfer taxes. And they're working out a system to have all-purpose built rentals also going to be exempt from the property transfer taxes. So this is good. We're starting to see governments realize taxing housing to death is not making it more affordable. I'm happy to see they're making these changes. Let's wrap this up talking about the major policy in the BC budget. That is their new flipping tax. Okay, so I'm gonna explain the policy first, and then I gotta go on a little bit of a rant because I gotta get this off my chest. So strap in, let's go. Starting off with what the policy is it's a 20% tax on the profits of a property that is sold within 2 years of its initial purchase. For the first year, it's the full 20%. And then the next year, it's going to be a declining amount every single day, it seems like. So eventually, by the time you hit year 2, you're going to have a 0% tax. Now, this is different, but it is an addition to the capital gains tax. So quick little refresher. When you sell a property that is not your primary residence, then you have 50% of all the profits are added onto your income and now become taxable. So not a 50% tax, 50% of the profits go onto your income are taxed at whatever your appropriate income tax rate is. This, of course, got changed in 2023, where the Canadian government said any property sold within 1 year, even if it is your primary residence, no longer has that primary residence capital gains tax exemption. There is, of course, a number of exemptions to this: death, divorce, job relocation, bankruptcy, and a few others. All of those make sense. Where this BC tax difference is it's not a 20% add to your income. It's a straight 20% tax, of course, for the first year, and then the following years, that sliding scale eventually ending up in 0, again, with the exact same exemptions that the federal government has for things like death, divorce, etc. Let's do a fun little quick hypothetical example here. They have a house that's sold within the first year, so kind of worst case scenario for this person. They have a $100,000 profit. Fantastic. That'd be awesome. A house creating $100,000 a year. Again, from where I'm from, that's not ever going to happen, basically. And on the markets, that absolutely does. So right off the bat, you got a $50,000 add to your income for that year for federal taxes. So depending on what your tax rate's gonna be, it's gonna change. We'll talk about that in a second here. And you've got this 20% tax from the BC government. So it's not a $70,000 tax. Realistically, it's probably more like a $40,000 tax bill, because that 50%, so $50,000 added onto somebody's income, probably taxed somewhere around 40%, maybe 50%. Let's go 50%. So $25,000 tax bill, and then you're gonna have a 20% tax, so $20,000 from the BC government, a $45,000 tax on a $100,000 profit. And now it's time to get into the rant that I have here, because this is just another example of a policy that sounds really, really good, and I really don't think it's sound policy. And I'm also going to dive deep because I want to know, how many flippers are there in BC right now? I put out a poll, and I know it's only a couple of days old at this point. There's not a ton of votes for it, but I asked you guys, how many houses in BC are sold within the first 2 years? Not flipped, just how many houses are resold within the first 2 years? Here's the results. Just like last week when we were talking about investors, I said, I understand it. There's a lot of frustration and emotion. People don't like investors, but we have to talk about this and take the emotions out of it because investors are part of the market, just like flippers are part of the market. So put the emotions aside here. Let's kind of have a serious talk about this. There's a legitimate business for people that take rundown houses, fix them up, put them back on the market, and they should be able to make a profit doing so. Why would you put in all the hard work and not make money out of this? I understand there's people probably like yourself that say, well, I'd rather take on that project because I want to do it myself. Understandable, completely so. There's a lot of buyers, and I would say the majority of buyers that either don't have the time, they don't have the skills, or they don't have the resources to take on a project like that. They just want to be able to have the opportunity to buy a house in an older neighborhood because they love the neighborhood that's already fixed up, where they can move in, put their stuff down, and continue on. So right now, the BC government is saying to people who have made a business out of that, no, we don't want your business. You shouldn't be able to run a business, even though, again, they're running this a legitimate business and paying taxes on everything they do. But BC government has basically decided no, because you're not going to be able to make money at this with a 20% tax on top of all of the taxes that you're going to pay. And so buyers are not going to have these houses as an option for them to purchase. As part of the research for this video, I asked a good friend of mine out in BC to pull some stats for me because I wanted to be able to have the numbers to talk to you guys about. So I said, go for say the last 10 years, find houses that were sold, resold again within the next 2 years. And there's no way to account for this, account for people who got divorced, somebody died, went through bankruptcy, etc. All the exemptions that both the federal and the BC government have for this new flipping tax. Just give me the numbers. And the numbers were pretty staggering and pretty startling. What percentage of properties in BC over about the last 10 years that were resold within 2 years? It was less than 4%. This is not a major part of the market. I understand the frustrations, the emotions. Like I said, put those aside. We're talking about less than 4% of the market here. Much like the foreign buyer ban was only a couple of percent of the market as well. These are small little things that get blown out of proportion. They get talked about by politicians because, of course, it looks good on Twitter and it sounds good in a policy announcement. But it's not the core issues that we have. It's not what's making housing affordable in Canada. And like I said, now you're taking away legitimate businesses from people and legitimate opportunities for buyers to purchase fixed up houses. If you truly want affordable housing in Canada, we can't continue with this policy of ban this and tax that and then wonder why housing isn't becoming more affordable in Canada. We need to match supply and demand. I've been saying this for a very long time, but it's a very simple principle. And we've started finally to see governments see, okay, we need to address supply. We need to maybe control population a little bit. We need to reduce taxes to make housing more affordable. Like, again, it's finally time that they're starting to realize this. But we've always been wondering why this isn't working. And we've seen things like, well, we need to do this and we need to do that. Address the supply problem and you'll solve things like blind bidding. Because guess what? You won't have all 30 people lined up to buy a house throwing bids on it. There's 30 houses for them. You won't have people speculating on houses sitting on them because there won't be a financial incentive to do so if houses aren't rapidly appreciating each and every single year. You won't have the big bad investors coming in and buying up houses left, right, and center because they make a killing in the rental market because there won't be the financial incentive. That is the true solution to Canada's housing crisis. It's as simple as that. Match supply with demand, and we won't have all these other side problems that we keep kind of, playing a whack-a-mole game with, trying to solve with ticky-tack bans and taxes. Okay, that's my rant for the week here. Thank you if you watched all the way to the end here. I hope you appreciate it. I want to see stable house prices in Canada. I want to see affordable housing in Canada because I want as many people as possible to have the opportunity to buy a house. So again, that's my rant for the day. If you like this video, please give this video a like, subscribe to Bald Prairie Real Estate if you haven't already. Leave me some comments below in the comment section because that's where I love chatting with you guys. And as always, thanks very much for watching.